The air out here was different, thicker, almost suffocating. It carried the faint smell of decay and rot that clung to everything. The hospital was just ahead, its darkened windows empty and lifeless, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I took careful steps, each one quieter than the last. In a place like this, noise was an invitation, a reckless call to whatever was lurking in the shadows. I moved quickly, sticking to the walls, ducking under broken beams and shattered glass. My senses were sharp. The rumors about this hospital echoed in my mind, rich with supplies but crawling with danger. Supplies were dwindling back at the wall, and if I didn't bring back something, more people would die. That was a risk I couldn't take. The side entrance was blocked by rubble, so I found an open window. I pulled myself up and over, landing softly on the hospital floor. The hallways were dark, the only light coming from my flashlight. Its glow cast an eerie shimmer across cracked tiles and faded bloodstains. The place was in ruins, a maze of decay and debris. As I ventured further, I felt the walls closing in, the silence pressing down around me. The corridors twisted and turned, and each step felt like a descent deeper into something I couldn't name. I was careful to keep my footsteps light, but as I crept forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The silence was thick, but there was something beneath it. Something that felt aware. Then, I heard it. A faint laugh, low and mocking, as if coming from the walls themselves. I froze, my heart pounding, ears straining to catch any sound. The laugh came again, echoing down the corridor, soft but close, filling the darkness with a cold, twisted edge. I kept moving, staying low, my flashlight off now to avoid drawing attention. Each step felt heavier, the shadows stretching longer, the laugh growing louder, closer. I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a flash of something just beyond the beam of light. When I turned, there was nothing. Just empty halls. "Who's there?" I called, my voice barely a whisper, the sound swallowed up by the stillness. The answer was another laugh, this one sharper, more deliberate, like whoever it was wanted me to hear it. I swallowed, my grip tightening on the knife at my side. Whoever was out here wasn't dead. The undead didn't laugh. The shadows shifted again, a rustle of movement just ahead. I took a step back, scanning the corridor, but it was too late. Hands grabbed me from behind, yanking me off balance, twisting my arm until I dropped the knife. I struggled, my instincts kicking in, but more hands joined in, grabbing my legs, my shoulders, pinning me down. "Well, well," a voice sneered close to my ear, rough and mocking. "Looks like we've got ourselves a lost little rat." They dragged me to my feet, forcing my arms behind my back. I tried to pull free, but their grip was iron strong. I caught a glimpse of wild eyes, faces twisted with sadistic glee, mouths stretched into grins that were more feral than human. "Look at him squirm," one of them sneered, his grip tightening painfully on my arm. "Thought he could just waltz in here and help himself." "Quiet, you idiots," another voice hissed from the shadows, sharp and annoyed. "Let's get him somewhere more private." They pushed me forward, herding me like prey, each of them taking turns shoving me into walls, kicking at my legs to keep me off balance. My vision blurred with each blow, my head throbbing as they forced me down a narrow corridor, deeper into the hospital. Finally, we reached an old operating room, its tiles stained and cracked. The equipment was long gone, but the smell of disinfectant and blood still lingered in the air. They shoved me into a metal chair, my arms bound tightly to the armrests with strips of filthy cloth. I fought against the bindings, but each pull only made them tighter, biting into my wrists, trapping me. The scavengers circled me, their faces illuminated by the faint light from outside, casting shadows that made them look like something out of a nightmare. There were 3 of them, a woman with stringy hair and a scar that twisted down her jaw, and 2 men, both gaunt and hollow-eyed, their expressions hungry and cold. "Well, well," the woman murmured, her voice dripping with mockery as she leaned in close. Her breath smelled sour, her skin coated in grime, her eyes glinting with malice. "Look what we found. Thought you could just come here and take what you wanted, didn't you?" I didn't answer, meeting her gaze with a hard stare. She laughed, a cold, brittle sound, and reached out, running a finger along my jawline. "Got some fight in him," she sneered, glancing at the others. "Maybe we'll have some fun with this one." They laughed, a cruel sound that filled the room, their voices blending into a twisted chorus. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms as I kept my face blank, refusing to show any fear. But my mind was racing, searching for any way out, any chance to break free. One of the men stepped closer, holding up a rusted knife, the blade dull and pitted but still sharp enough to cut. He grinned, his teeth yellow and cracked, and ran the tip of the knife along my cheek, light enough not to break the skin, yet. "Maybe we'll mark you," he murmured, his tone almost gentle, though his eyes were anything but. "Let everyone know who you belong to. How does that sound?" I stared back, refusing to flinch. "Go to hell," he laughed, a short, harsh bark, and pressed the knife against my skin. I felt the bite of the blade, sharp and cold, as he dragged it down from the corner of my mouth, cutting a slow, jagged line. Blood trickled down my face, warm and slick, the pain sharp and immediate. But I clenched my jaw, refusing to cry out. "Oh, he's got guts," the woman murmured, watching with a smile that was anything but kind. "Let's see how long that lasts." The knife pressed down harder, carving another line up the other side of my face, creating a grotesque, twisted smile. My vision blurred from the pain, blood pooling at my chin, dripping onto my shirt. I could feel the cut stretching with each twitch, each involuntary flinch, but I kept my head high, meeting their gaze. "Look at him now," one of them sneered, stepping back to admire their handiwork. "Got himself a real smile now." They circled me, laughing, their voices filling the room with a sound that made my skin crawl. The pain burned through me, hot and relentless, each beat of my heart sending fresh waves of agony across my face. I could feel the blood drying, sticky against my skin, the cuts raw and deep. But I refused to scream. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. As they taunted me, my mind searched for a way out, but the bindings were too tight. I was too weak, the blood loss sapping my strength. I had no choice but to wait, to endure, hoping that some chance would come. The scavengers laughed and jeered, their voices blending into a haze as my vision dimmed. My mind slipped into a fog of pain. The world faded, the sounds blurring together until everything went dark. When I came to, the first thing I felt was the pain. It was sharp, raw, radiating from my cheeks and throbbing with every heartbeat. Blood trickled down my face, drying and cracking as it pooled along my chin. My vision was blurred, my head pounding. As I blinked, the dim light of the room swam into focus, and I remembered where I was, and who I was with. The scavengers were still there, circling me like vultures, their eyes gleaming with sick pleasure as they admired the mess they'd made of my face. My arms were still bound tightly to the armrests, the rough cloth digging into my wrists, and my body felt heavy, like it was sinking deeper into the chair with every breath. I tried to pull at the bindings, but my strength had faded, replaced by a dull ache that sapped my energy. "Well, look who's back with us," the woman sneered, stepping into view. Her face was inches from mine, her eyes full of malice. She traced her finger along the fresh cuts on my face, pressing down just enough to make me wince. I clenched my jaw, refusing to react. "You're one tough little rat," she murmured, almost admiringly. "Most scream by now." Her companions laughed, their voices harsh and mocking, echoing off the empty walls. I forced myself to stay still, my gaze fixed on the ground, tuning out the taunts, the jeers. It took everything I had to keep myself from reacting, to hold on to whatever shred of control I had left. "Maybe we cut a little deeper," one of the men suggested, his voice thick with amusement. He held up a jagged piece of metal, rusted and corroded, waving it in front of me. "See if that makes him scream." I swallowed, my pulse racing as I braced myself. My mind was a fog of pain and fear, but a single thought rose through the haze. I need to get out of here. "Hold on," the woman said, holding up her hand, her eyes fixed on mine. "I think we're missing something." She crouched in front of me, studying my face with a strange intensity, her gaze moving slowly over the wounds, the blood, the bruises. Her lips twisted into a smile, a mocking parody of the one they'd carved into my face. "You know," she said, almost thoughtful, "we've seen plenty of scavengers come through here, plenty of rats thinking they're strong enough to survive out here. But you..." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're different, aren't you? Got that fire in your eyes." I met her gaze, refusing to look away. If she thought she could break me, she was wrong. She straightened. a wicked glint in her eyes as she motioned to the others. Let's make sure he remembers this. Something permanent. The man holding the piece of rusted metal stepped forward, grinning, his eyes alight with excitement. He dragged the metal along my arm, leaving a thin line of blood in its wake. The others watched, some of them laughing, others just waiting, eyes cold and hungry. Let's carve this lesson in deep, the man muttered, his voice low and cruel. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms as the metal bit into my skin, slicing through muscle and nerve. The pain was immediate, searing, but I forced myself to stay silent, to keep my gaze steady. They wouldn't get the satisfaction of my screams. Still nothing, the woman murmured, her eyes narrowing with annoyance. Maybe we have to go for the throat. Just as she raised her knife again, a noise echoed down the hall, a low, guttural moan, faint but unmistakable. The scavengers went still, their eyes flicking toward the doorway. Another moan sounded, closer this time, louder, a chorus of undead voices filling the silence. A shiver ran through the room as the reality dawned on them. Zombies. Drawn by the sounds of their laughter, the smell of fresh blood. One of the men cursed, stepping back, his face paling as the moans grew louder, echoing down the empty halls. We need to get out of here, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. They're coming. The woman scowled, her grip on the knife tightening as she glanced back at me, her face twisting with frustration. We're not done with him. Another scavenger, his face twisted with fear, grabbed her arm. Leave him. We're not sticking around to fight those things. Let's go. She hesitated, her gaze flickering between me and the doorway, her jaw clenched in frustration. But the moans grew closer, louder, filling the hall with the sound of the dead, and her resolve faltered. With a snarl, she threw down the knife, backing away, her eyes never leaving mine. You got lucky, rat, she spat, her voice full of venom. They filed out of the room, their footsteps fading down the corridor as they left me alone, bound and bleeding. My heart raced, fear clawing at me as the moans drew closer, filling the empty silence. The zombies were coming, and I was still tied to the chair, weak and vulnerable, an easy meal. With every ounce of strength I had left, I twisted my wrists, pulling at the bindings, feeling the rough cloth cut into my skin, the blood making my hands slick. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the terror building in my chest as the first shadow filled the doorway, a twisted, shambling figure, its eyes clouded, its mouth stretched open in a hungry snarl. I pulled harder, my wrists burning as the cloth loosened just enough for me to slip one hand free. My vision blurred, my strength fading, but I kept going, adrenaline surging as I reached for the knife the woman had dropped. The zombies shuffled closer, their moans filling the room, their dead eyes locked on me. I slashed at the other binding, freeing my hand, then staggered to my feet, my legs weak and unsteady. The undead were almost on me, their hands reaching, their mouths gaping, but I stumbled back, using every bit of strength I had left to keep moving. I backed toward the door, my gaze fixed on the zombies, my heart pounding as I slipped into the hallway. The scavengers were gone, but their laughter still echoed in my mind, a haunting memory of the torture they'd inflicted, the scars they'd carved into my face. The dead were closing in, but I kept going, fueled by rage, by pain, by the need to survive. And as I moved through the decaying halls, I made a silent promise. They'd pay for this. Every last one of them. The hospital hallways were a battlefield of shadows and rot. My face throbbed, each step sending a new wave of pain through my skull as blood trickled from the wounds the scavengers had carved into my skin. The grotesque smile they'd etched still stung, every movement pulling at the fresh cuts. But there was no time to think about the pain now. I was free, and I had one goal: survive the undead horde filling this place with their hungry moans. I ducked down a corridor, gripping the knife the woman had left behind, its dull edge still smeared with my blood. My breaths were shallow, every inhale searing my lungs as I fought against the overwhelming urge to collapse. I couldn't let them catch me, not like this. The moans were getting louder, closer, a chorus of death closing in. Shadows lurched in the dim light as the zombies shambled forward, their faces twisted into expressions of mindless hunger. The hallway stretched out ahead of me, the undead pouring in from every side, their decaying fingers scraping against the walls as they advanced. I bolted down the hall, adrenaline pumping through my veins, but my body was weak, every step a struggle. The first zombie lunged out of a doorway to my right, its eyes clouded and hollow, its mouth open in a silent scream. I sidestepped, slamming my shoulder into the wall as I brought the knife down in a quick, desperate motion. The blade drove into its skull with a sickening crunch, and the creature went limp, dropping to the floor. More were coming, the shadows shifting as they filled the hall, drawn by the noise, by the scent of blood. I yanked the knife free, backing up as another zombie staggered toward me, its arms outstretched. I could see the scavenger's handiwork on this one. Its body was marked with slashes, torn skin hanging from its arms, a grotesque reminder of what they did to anyone unlucky enough to fall into their hands. I slashed at its throat, the blade slicing through decayed flesh, blackened blood spilling down its chest as it stumbled back, briefly disoriented. But it kept coming, its hands clawing at the air, its moan a deep, guttural sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Come on," I whispered through clenched teeth, steadying myself as more zombies lurched toward me. I was cornered, with only one way out, and I knew I'd have to fight my way through. I launched myself forward, driving the knife into the skull of the closest zombie, feeling the blade crunch through bone. The creature's eyes rolled back, its body sagging as I pulled the knife free, but another took its place, its fingers clawing at my shoulder, digging into the raw wounds left by the scavengers. I gritted my teeth, slamming my elbow into its chest, forcing it back. The zombie stumbled, but more hands reached for me, grabbing at my arms, my clothes, pulling me into the writhing mass of bodies. I could smell the rot, feel the damp, decayed skin pressing against me as I twisted, slashing wildly, desperate to break free. One of them managed to grab my arm, its grip like a vice, pulling me toward its open mouth. I struggled, feeling its teeth graze my skin as I wrenched my arm free, plunging the knife into its eye socket with a sickening squelch. It released me, collapsing to the ground, but another one took its place, its hands reaching, its mouth dripping with hunger. I pushed forward, shoving the undead aside as I forced my way down the hall. My muscles screamed, every movement a fresh wave of agony, but I kept going, driven by sheer survival instinct. The zombies were relentless, their moans filling the air, drowning out everything else as they closed in. Ahead, I spotted a staircase leading up to a broken window, moonlight spilling through, a glimpse of freedom just out of reach. But between me and the stairs, the hallway was packed with zombies, their bodies pressed close together, a wall of decay and death. "Not dying here," I growled, gripping the knife tighter as I charged forward, slashing and stabbing with every ounce of strength I had left. The blade drove into skulls, necks, any part I could reach, my movements frantic and uncoordinated, but effective enough to clear a path. Each step was a battle, each zombie a new threat, but I pushed through, leaving a trail of bodies in my wake. Blood and ichor splattered my face, mixing with my own. The smell thick and nauseating, but I forced myself to ignore it. My focus locked on the staircase ahead. I reached the base of the stairs, my chest heaving, my vision blurred with exhaustion. The zombies were closing in from all sides, their moans growing louder, filling the hospital with a cacophony of death. I stumbled up the steps, my legs trembling, the cuts on my face pulling painfully as I clenched my teeth. Halfway up, a zombie lunged from the shadows, its hands grabbing my ankle, pulling me back. I fell, my back slamming into the stairs, the knife slipping from my grasp as the creature crawled up, its face inches from mine, its breath hot and foul. With a surge of desperation, I grabbed a loose piece of rubble from the stairs, slamming it into the zombie's head, again and again, until it stopped moving. I kicked it aside, scrambling to my feet, grabbing the knife before I continued up the stairs, each step feeling like a mile. At the top, I stumbled toward the window, the cool night air brushing against my skin, a promise of escape. But as I looked back, I saw them, the undead, filling the stairwell, their eyes fixed on me, their hunger unending. One last push. I climbed out of the window, lowering myself onto the broken fire escape outside, the metal creaking under my weight. I could hear the zombies below, their moans echoing up the walls, reaching for me, but they couldn't follow. I was out. The cold night air hit me like a wave, and I staggered, collapsing against the railing, my body finally giving in to exhaustion. My face throbbed, the cuts stretching painfully, a twisted reminder of what the scavengers had done. As I leaned there, catching my breath, I pulled out a scrap of paper from my pocket, my hands shaking as I scribbled down the words. Rule 9. Beware of the scavengers. Not all threats in the wasteland were undead. Some were worse, some were alive, and they left scars that wouldn't heal.